All right. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for, for Two Dudes and Some Bullshit. The date today is Sunday, December the 9th, 2018. And Tony, Michael, and I, we are very thankful for everybody who will be joining us today. We are going to be talking about some of our favorite movies, ladies and gentlemen. Tony, how the hell are you today?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling a lot better. I made a post on my social media yesterday or a couple of days ago, as well as my Facebook. Obviously, my regular video routine has sort of been a little disjointed these last couple of weeks, and primarily because obviously I was in Los Angeles for the 40th anniversary convention, and then I was back for a little bit, but then I had to go back for the Voice Arts Awards. And as soon as I came back from the Voice Arts Awards, I got sick. And it's taken about 2.5 weeks for this cold to it's slowly beginning to dissipate. So I definitely feel a lot better than I did this time last week, and certainly this time compared to a couple of weeks ago. And I'm ready to start getting into some videos again, starting next week. That's my goal, is to at least put up something next week that'll be kind of fun for everybody. So I appreciate everybody's patience, of course. And of course, before I forget, this coming Wednesday, December the 12th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on this YouTube channel, I will be speaking with Marion Singh, of course, from Halloween 2018. So for everybody, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Marion seems like a really cool person. So we're going to be talking Halloween 2018, her role, how it came to be, her role as an actor and a stunt performer. She's been a martial artist for about 25 years. So that's going to be cool to get into that. And that's this Wednesday, December 12th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here. So
is this going to be a live stream that you're doing?
Yes. Marion and I, we're going to do a live stream. We're going to see if we can get it to work. And everybody, of course, in the chat room at a given point, of course, will be able to ask her some questions. So I thought that would be a lot of fun for everybody. So it's been a little crazy, but I'm slowly getting back into it.
It's crazy because my mother ended up getting really sick. My father got really sick. My brother got really sick. I'm over here like, all right, everybody stay the fuck away from me because I don't want to get sick.
Right.
I had to fly out to Virginia this past week to do some work up in Virginia, which went over very well. I got another big video shoot coming up this week for, I don't know if you've ever heard of Chick-fil-A. They're yeah. So I'm doing some video commercial work with them this week. Kind of excited for that.
Awesome.
But yeah, like everybody I know is like sick, and I'm like doing this. Like I'm gonna start wearing masks as I walk outside the house because I've so far, knock on wood, I've avoided that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I normally don't get sick. And this is just one of those things where it's one of those cold that is just kind of lingering, and it's not really there, but it's kind of there. And just when you think you can get back into doing some videos, you feel kind of chilly. So you go lie down and but like I said, I'm happy to say that I'm like 90%. I'm functioning at 90%. So I'm pretty sure I can get a video up next week, which will be great. So
I'm definitely looking forward to, if I can't catch the live stream on Wednesday, I'm going to definitely watch the playback. And I'm also looking forward to hearing your or seeing your trailer sequel. Like, what are you going to be doing with that? I saw the little thing you posted the other day. Like, are you going to do something live, like, put together yourself and film it yourself? Or are you going to take bits from the movie? Like, how are you planning to do that? Or is this a surprise that we can't know?
No, it's nothing. I hopefully I don't disappoint anybody. It's nothing like that. I just the trailer quote unquote that I posted on my channel before this live stream that we're doing now. So a few days ago was just my theatrical illustrated way of sort of getting people excited about a video that I am in the middle of fleshing out, ideas I'm in the middle of fleshing out. And I'm going to talk about what I would do in greater detail for a Halloween 2018 sequel. Prior to going back to Hollywood for the Voice Arts Awards, I posted a video where I talked about my blueprint idea.
Right, and I saw that. Very good. I liked it a lot. Hopefully, maybe somebody will actually listen to you.
Yeah,
probably not, but
probably not. But I made it very clear, though, at the beginning of that video, I said, don't misinterpret that because I'm able to talk about this, that I somehow believe there should be a sequel, or that it's my glowing endorsement for a sequel. Because that's not at all. They're not mutually exclusive to each other. I can absolutely look at a movie and say a sequel is completely unnecessary. They don't need to do it. But because I love Halloween and I'm passionate about the content, for shits and giggles, I certainly can go, well, you know what? If you're going to do it, because you probably are, and you don't give a frog's fat ass what I think, here's what I think you should do or could do to give you the best probability of success. That's where I come from these videos. And I just want people to understand that it doesn't mean that I think they should do this, because really I think the movie kind of ended and that's kind of it. But if they're going to do it, well, here's kind of a fun idea that might actually work. So that's where I'm coming at it from, this video that I hope to get up. I don't know when. It might be before the new year. It may not be. But there's many different ways I could do it. I might have some sound effects in there. I might do some voiceover perhaps, but it's certainly not me going out and shooting anything. Unfortunately, I don't have the time for that right now. And winter is upon us here. We don't have any snow yet, but certainly the chillier weather is upon us here. So that fall vibe is kind of gone. You can tell it's sort of early winter. But my goal is just to deliver on that promise. Sorry, I have a lozenge in my mouth. To deliver on that promise of, okay, you guys want to know what my fleshed out idea will be. Here's what it is in a little more detail. And maybe I'll add some, some sound effects in there to help me talking and the narrative to really illustrate and paint that picture for you in your own mind. We'll see how it goes. I'm still in the middle of fleshing out those ideas, but yes, that is coming. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun because I'm passionate about this shit. So I know I have the ability to really make my audience visualize what I'm thinking. It doesn't mean you'll agree with me. You might think it's a fucking shitty idea, but hopefully not. Hopefully not. So yeah, that is coming.
Or if you're me, you'll probably piss him off. I saw that in the comment section this week. I literally had my girl watch our live stream from last week. I said, okay, you got to watch this for me because what did I say to piss people off? And she watched it again. She's like, bro, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know either. Yeah. But every week I seem to piss people off. Yeah. So, and I'm probably going to piss people off tonight. So I've just learned to accept that in life.
You can't, as Ricky Nelson said, you can't please everybody, so you got to please yourself, right? Exactly. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And not the kind of pleasing you're thinking of, ladies and gentlemen. Get your mind out of the gutter. Okay.
Bang.
So yes, we're talking favorite movies on this episode of Two Dudes and Some Bullshit. Now, Tony and I have to preface this. Tony and I are going to give you a list of our favorite movies, but don't misinterpret that this is the quintessential list, that this list can't change, that out of all the movies in the world, that these are our favorite, bar none, and that no movies could be. There are a lot of movies that Tony and I really like. And there are movies that have been left off this list that could easily be on this list. And maybe if you were to ask us a couple of weeks from now or tomorrow morning, that they might be on there. So we had to kind of be decisive and say, okay, well, here's a group of some of our favorite movies. So that's how you have to kind of approach it, is that these are some of our favorite movies, not the absolute end of these are our favorite movies and no other movie could ever make the list. So just keep that in mind, because there might be a few movies that you may be surprised that are not on here, but that's only because we had to be decisive for the sake of time. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to sit there and pinpoint, like, what are your favorite films? Because as you and I were discussing off camera before we went live, for me, I narrowed it down to what influenced me in my life, whether it was influenced, for my career as a photographer and filmmaker, or if it, there's a sentimental, emotional attachment to it that brings me back to like my childhood or whatever. Because, as we were talking before we went live, you start listing off, this category, that category, this director, that director, this film, there's so many great movies. It's really hard to sit there and pinpoint it down. And guys, I kid you not, this just goes to show you the NSYNC May and Dave on, and I don't mean NSYNC bye. I mean, just how the way our minds think together. He sends me an email today. He's like, hey dude, I got 10 movies with 5 honorable mentions. And this whole week we hadn't spoken to each other. And I literally said the same thing. I'm like, bro, this whole week I'm trying to think of stuff. And I had 5 honorable mentions and 10 favorites as well too, prior to the show. And it just goes to show you how dude, I'm telling you, we are like twins. We are legitimate twins now. I mean,
It's
that was creepy when I got that message. I'm like, I've been thinking this whole thing this whole week, and then the honorable mentions. And when you said that, I'm like, oh my God, okay, here we go.
It's synchronicity. For those of you that don't know, Tony and I are the same age, and we were born 5 days apart from each other. I was born on the 24th of May, 1979. Tony was born on the 29th of May, 1979, which is just hilarious. But anyway, so yeah, we're brothers from another mother, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. So you want to get the honorable mentions out of the way before we get into our list?
Okay, sounds good. And again, folks, keep in mind that there are probably another 35 movies that could have easily ended up on this honorable mentions, right? This is just, I mean,
I'm seeing some of the stuff in the chat room and people are mentioning and that I totally forgot about. And I'm like, I agree with you already.
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally, but when you're making a list and you're a movie fan, it would be much easier for my girlfriend to make a list of 5 movies that are her favorites because by and large, I mean, she likes movies. Who doesn't like movies, right? But I'm certainly the movie person in the relationship. And it probably would be easier for her to come up with 5 movies because she's not as invested into the movie world, right? So she could say, well, these are my top 5, where it's more difficult for us because there's so many that could easily make that list. So anyway, here are 5 honorable mentions. Okay, these honorable mentions could easily have been 35, but here are 5 honorable mentions, movies that I absolutely adore for one reason or another. That if I saw it on TV, I would absolutely have to sit down and watch at least 15 minutes of it. I think they're just great. So here are 5 honorable mentions for me. So we have, in no particular order, by the way, Stand By Me. Oh, an absolute 80s classic. The performances are fantastic. This was 1986, I believe, based, of course, on the short story by Stephen King called The Body. And just great performances all around and a great narration by Richard Dreyfuss. I mean, arguably Richard Dreyfuss's narration is almost one of the highlights of the movie because you really feel that he's this character. And I love this movie so much that I took one of the last things that Richard Dreyfuss's character typed at the end of this movie was, I'm paraphrasing, but it's something to the effect of, I never again later in life had the kind of friends that I did when I was 12, ... Does anybody? And I found that very profound. And you, now, of course, you could say that about, it doesn't have to be 12. It could be when you're in high school or like whatever the case is. It's supposed to symbolize that we never truly have the kind of friends we do later in life like we do when we were young. And so I used that at one of my best friend's wedding. Years later, I was his best man, and I wrote this great long speech. And at the end of that speech, to really sort of cap everything off, I delivered that line. But instead of saying 12, because I didn't know him when he was 12, I knew him in high school, I chose young high school. And that was a lot of fun to be able to sort of utilize that. So everybody knows the movie. Everybody loves the movie. It's definitely one of the best adaptations of a Stephen King. Of course, again, it's based on a short story, not an entire thick novel, but definitely one of the best Stephen King adaptations out there. And of course, just awesome shit. Next, of course, is 1985's The Goonies. Now, again, something to keep in mind, folks, that these honorable mentions and our top 10, we're not necessarily saying that these are the greatest movies of all time. These are some of our favorite movies of all time for whatever reason. They could be because of nostalgia. They could be because of, something that we really relate to because, oh, we used to do that when we were kids, or that's our kind of comedy, or, oh, that's what I do when I think about that kind of stuff. So you have to keep that in mind as well. But 1985's The Goonies is, definitely for the nostalgia. Definitely, that's what it was like being a kid. Now, in 1985, I was 6, so I was probably about 6 years younger than the kids are in the Goonies in 1985, but it was pretty marginal at that time, because even at 6 years old, or if you're 10 or 11 years old, you were outside riding your bikes. You were, playing. Maybe you were playing different things. Maybe you couldn't go as far, but definitely that idea of being outside and creating your own adventure and getting caught up in some sort of adventure and using your imagination and all that kind of stuff was very prominent, whether you were 6 or 7 or 10 or 11. So the Goonies really speaks to that era of being a kid. And it wasn't necessarily the treasure adventure that spoke to us, because maybe a treasure adventure was sort of a thing maybe kids were excited about in the 50s or something like that. But it was just the sense of adventure. They could have been going after anything. It was the sense of adventure that they were on that really spoke to the children of that era. Again, whether you were 6 or 12. So we all know the Goonies. We love it. It's a classic children's movie from 1985, and it was awesome. And the kids swore it. They felt like real kids. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't really like. One of the things that I've heard, that people who weren't into the Goonies earlier in life as a child, when they watch the Goonies later in life, it's one of the criticisms I actually hear some people say about the Goonies is that there was too much arguing. There was too much talking over each other. There was too much this, that, and the other. And actually, I think that lends to its strength. It really feels like these are, that the conversation is organic. Although it's scripted, that's what it was like being kids. You'd talk over each other. You'd get excited. You'd be like, no, come on. You'd swear because it was cool to do so, and you knew you shouldn't be doing it. So it definitely felt real. There is this sort of grounded, like that's what it was like being a kid. So anyways, moving on, 1980, I think this is 87. I always get this mixed up, 87 or 88. I think it's 87. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, starring Steve Martin and, of course, the late John Candy. Oh, my God. John Candy, good Canadian guy, born right here in Toronto. I think it was here in Toronto anyway. I know Jim Carrey was born here in Toronto. But anyway, John Candy. God, what a just beautiful soul. He's just such an amazing comedic talent, really nice man. And his performance in Planes, Trades, and Automobiles is my favorite performance of John Candy. When you ask most people what their favorite performance of John Candy is, they tend to lean to Uncle Buck. And don't get me wrong, Uncle Buck is a great... Oh, looks like your dog is barking up a storm. I love it. Yeah. There must be a dog walking by or something.
Yeah, probably. My neighbor's dog.
Oh, yeah, that could probably do it. So, with John Candy, a lot of people tend to default to Uncle Buck. And you know what? That I agree. Uncle Buck is a great John Candy movie, 1990, I believe. But I tend to default to Planes, Trades, and Automobiles. I mean, just his character. It's my kind of comedy. It's so silly. It's funny. It's so stupid. It's funny. It's situational comedy. Imagine being in this kind of environment with this guy. I mean, who writes this shit? Well, obviously John Hughes does. But I mean, like a shower curtain ring salesman. It's so obscure. It's so like eclectic and weird but he plays it so seriously. The comedy is just brilliant. And I could go into great detail, but for the sake of time, of course, I want to move this along. But definitely, arguably my favorite comedy of all time. But it switches between that and a comedy that I'm going to talk about in a couple of seconds here. Touch of Evil, Orson Welles' Touch of Evil, starring, of course, Charlton Heston. Oh, my goodness. And I saw this movie for the first time probably about 10 years ago. And this was one of the influences, I believe, on the original Halloween for you Halloween fans out there, because the opening shot is done in one take. Now, obviously, I believe it was handheld at that time because the Steadicam, this movie was 1958, I think it was 58. Of course, there was no Steadicam per se at that time, so it was handheld. Watch the opening of Touch of Evil, and it's just beautifully shot. The cinematography is fantastic. You get that, it's that, that black and white noir sort of feel to it. Orson Welles was brilliant with that kind of thing. Every camera angle, the low angles, the low key lighting, the mood, the atmosphere, really complements this story. So if you haven't checked out Touch of Evil and you're a big Halloween fan and you're a big John Carpenter fan and you love the old black and white sort of noir Orson Welles kind of movies, you got to check this out. It's a classic. Yeah, just please do. Again, I could go into detail, but for the sake of time here, we got to move on. Trust me, check it out. You'll love it if you like that kind of thing. And then, of course, last on our honorable mentions is 1983's Vacation. National Lampoon's Vacation. The original Vacation, starring Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo, and directed by the late Harold Ramis, of course, who played Egon Spengler in the Ghostbusters. And this is... Listen, this is the epitome of everybody's family vacation. If you have the kind of family that we had, my father was Clark W. Griswold, okay? That was Earl McRae. I mean, whenever it came to family time or whatever it was, and I'll give you an example. I don't know if I was born yet or not, so it might have been before I was born, but I remember my mother telling me that back in the 70s, they all went to the drive-in. And of course, at that time, you had to have your windows down in order to hear the movie. It was at a time, of course, when, you know, you couldn't turn on the radio like you do now to hear it through your car. The speaker was actually on the outside of the car. I'm sure those of you who are old enough remember that. Well, my father had this genius idea, because it's the middle of the summer, to put mosquito netting around the car, because you have to have the windows open, right? So, okay, well, no problem. We'll put the mosquito netting around the car. But then, of course, he mosquito nets himself out of the car, so he can't get back in the car. And this is like a typical, like, that's what my father would do, you know, and it's like something I would do, you know, I got to admit, it's like something I would do. So that is like, it's just the comedy, the irony, the slapstick, you know, Chase's performance as Clark W. Griswold. It's so my family. It's so my father. And anybody who's ever, you know, has that kind of a family can certainly relate. Again, I could go really deep, but for the sake of time, I want to move on and let Tony get his 5 honorable mentions in here. But those definitely are on my list. Stand By Me, The Goonies, Planes, Trades, and Automobiles, Touch of Evil, and the original National Lampoon's Vacation. Tony, take it away.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think all 5 of those films are great. I have all 5 of them. I have them all on VHS, except for Touch of Evil. I'm going to have to, I wrote that down. I have not seen that film, so I do appreciate that suggestion, and that is something that I'll probably watch either this week or, you know, maybe probably during the holiday break. So I definitely appreciate that, because I have not seen that before. Yeah, so as far as my 5 honor...
Sorry, I just want to say, and also for those of you that I can't believe I missed this, but of course, Touch of Evil. Excuse me, I sucking on a lozenge here. Touch of Evil, of course, stars Janet Leigh as well, which is Jamie Lee Curtis's mom. So for those who want to check that out, I highly recommend it. Orson Welles is in it. He directs it, and it stars Charlton Heston and Janet Leigh. So yeah, awesome. Definitely check it out.
So my 5, well, I'm going to start with one is actually a trilogy, and it is the Rise, Dawn, and War of Planet of the Apes, the recent one here with Andy Serkis, who is portraying Caesar. I mean, it's just a phenomenal trilogy. It's one that I actually just finished watching here not too long ago. Again, I probably watch those 3 films at least twice a year. And again, when I was going through the list of, like, you know, my tops and whatnot, I think of that, like, how many times do I go back and rewatch a film again? And that trilogy of the Planet of the Apes films was just so well done. And Andy Serkis, you know, in my opinion, should have gotten an Academy Award for his performance as Caesar, because it just absolutely was amazing. Next up on the list is Mallrats, Kevin Smith's Mallrats, which is the second film back in the day. You know,
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Kevin Smith started off with Clerks, as we all know, and then Mallrats was the second film. And Mallrats, for me and my brother, man, like, there's so many lines from that film, whether it was lines from Brody or T.S. Or even Ben Affleck. I forget Ben Affleck's character's name now in the movie. Do you remember what his character's name now in the movie was? Jesus, what was his name? Somebody in the chat tell me Ben Affleck's character's name in Mallrats. Why am I forgetting his name now? But the movie is just, huh? What is it?
No, I forget.
I'm trying not to Google. I'm like trying not to cheat and do Google. But anyways, there's so many great lines. In fact, that might be, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but that might be Stan Lee's first cameo appearance in a film, when he has that conversation with Brody. I don't know.
At the airport, right?
At the mall. At the mall.
The mall. Okay.
Because Stan Lee's making an appearance, and then Brody sees that, and Brody tries to cut in line and starts some shit with some dudes, and he's like, just because a guy reads comic doesn't mean he doesn't know how to throw down, or whatever the line is. And then of course, there's the classic, he's on the escalator, the kid's on the escalator again. It's just such a fun movie, man. I absolutely love that movie. I like Clerks, but I think of the two, Mallrats is probably my favorite in the Kevin Smith filmography. Next is To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird is probably my favorite book as far as novel, a book that I read in school. Next to Lord of the Flies, it's kind of like neck and neck with those two. And just, Gregory Peck. What can you say? It's almost the perfect movie. Really, when you talk about To Kill a Mockingbird. The other honorable mention is a movie that came out earlier this year. Actually, not earlier this year, came out a month ago in October, or now 2 months ago, because we're in December. Time flies when you're getting old, which is Mid-90s. Mid-90s is a movie that Jonah Hill did. Those of you who follow me on Instagram, I'm really into skateboarding. Skateboarding is my second life next to photography. And this film, it's too early to sit there and put it in like my favorite films of all time, because it's only been out for a couple months. For me with movies, I've got to let it sit for a long time before I can really say like, yeah, this is like my all-time favorite film. But the movie was done so well that if you were a teenager in the 90s, especially a teenager who skateboarded in the 90s like myself, man, this movie's going to take you right back to that time in your life. And Jonah Hill, for his first directorial debut, and I think he even wrote the script as well too, he nailed it, absolutely crushed it. So I wanted to at least throw that out there, because this will be a perfect segue into my last honorable mention, which is it's called Dogtown and Z Boys. It's actually a documentary based on for those of you who don't know, back in the 1970s, you had three skaters by the name of Stacy Peralta, Tony Alva, and Jay Adams, who basically revolutionized the whole skateboarding industry. These are the guys who introduced us to bowl skating and skateboarding in swimming pools. And this documentary really breaks into that, into each individual skaters and some other people who made a huge impact to the skating community and the skating world. And it's just so well done. I love documentary films, and of course, especially that anything's going to lean towards a personal interest of mine. And I would highly recommend checking it out, because it kind of goes and marries with one of my favorite films that we're going to get into here later on. That's in my top 10 favorite films of all time. So if you get a chance, even if you're not into skating and you want to see where the foundation of skateboarding came from and why, like, I'm trying not to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen this documentary, definitely check it out, because it's a very interesting story of how skating and swimming pools came about, and the reason why these guys, back when they weren't even guys, these were little kids at the time, why they were doing this and how they revolutionized the skateboarding industry. So
very cool.
Those are my five honorables. I haven't heard of that.
Very cool. Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, it's time to move on. Now, again, like I said, there are so many movies I could have put on here. There's so many movies that when I was making the list and checking it twice and trying to figure out what was naughty and nice, I was thinking to myself, what the hell? I got to put that on it. No, I just, I don't want to. So just keep that in mind, folks. All right. Here is my top 10, some of my favorite movies, a top 10 list of some of my favorite movies. That's how I will preface it. A top 10 list of some of my favorite movies. Here we go.
Are we going to start with the,
Oh, and by the way, this is in no particular order.
Right.
So don't think that this is somehow in some particular order. All right. So I will do my best to get through them as quickly as I can, because I don't want to, take up a lot of time here. But so we got again, in no particular order, one of my favorite movies of all time is undoubtedly the second chapter in the original Star Wars trilogy, The Empire Strikes Back. This is the epitome of how you do a second act in a 3-act play. It leaves our protagonists in danger. It leaves a lot of questions. It introduces a lot of new mythology and pushes the narrative forward. We're left with well, I mean, if you compare this middle act to the middle act of the new trilogy with The Last Jedi, right? I mean, in this one, we're left with, oh my God, we find out that Darth Vader is Luke's father. Luke gets his hand cut off. We find out more about the Force. Han Solo was frozen in carbonite. I mean, there's so many things that end up happening. There's so many questions unanswered. And that's what you want at the end of a second act, moving into the third act. We know how these things go. We know that there's going to be redemption. We know that, the good guys are going to win. It's a fairy tale. I mean, that's what this is all about. But you still want to leave that the second act is always the darkest for our protagonist. So it's just brilliant. I mean, one of my favorite moments in The Empire Strikes Back, I personally think, is one of the greatest moments, not just in Star Wars history, but in cinematic history. And it's the moment where Luke arrives on Bespin, and he comes up into the chamber where Darth Vader is waiting for him, and the lights sort of go out a bit, or come on, I guess it is. And Darth Vader is standing at the very top there. And in this, in that epic Darth Vader, James Earl Jones voice, he says, the Force is with you, young Skywalker, but you are not a Jedi yet. As the way he says yet, it's that yet, and it's just, it just like reverberates through the whole I mean, maybe it's because I have surround sound on, but it's fucking epic. And it's just so great. And he walks up there. It's like this moment, and he turns on the lightsaber. It's just, not only is it an iconic still shot, it's all come to this moment. And it's not to say that Return of the Jedi does not have that moment as well, where it's like Luke is now, redeeming himself, but there's something real magical about, evil and the dark side having the upper hand here, right? It's like, listen here, little boy, if you think you're all hot shit, come here, and it's just, it's so, the way he says it, it's one of my favorite moments in the entire film. If I'm watching The Empire Strikes Back with somebody who's never watched the movie before, and it comes to that moment, I will, it never fails, I will watch them watching that moment to see if it's affecting them in the same ways that it's affecting me. So undoubtedly one of my favorite movies of all time, for sure. And again, that doesn't mean I don't like the first one. Doesn't mean I don't like Return of the Jedi. It just means that this hits me in an emotional way that just is very, very special. Okay, 1994 is The Shawshank Redemption. This is considered one of the greatest motion pictures of all time. This was a box office bomb, a box office disaster, a critical success, but a box office disaster in 1994. This was directed by Frank Darabont, of course, another Stephen King adaptation. This movie is, I mean, what is there to say about The Shawshank Redemption that has not already been said, that I wouldn't just go into repeating myself on? It is absolutely brilliant. To live vicariously through this. I mean, we have all been wrong. I mean, not to say that we've all been committed of murder that we didn't do, but we've all been wronged in some sort of way in our life. So we are living, whether it's minuscule or whether it's great or whatever it is, we all want redemption. Right, we are living vicariously through Andy Dufresne's character.
I was just going to say that. I think the way Tim Robbins portrays Andy Dufresne is so spot on. Of that guy that you kind of know you think he's innocent, but you're not sure if he's innocent. And then, of course, Morgan Freeman as well too, with portraying Red. I mean, and the way the narrative of the story of how their friendship evolves while they're in prison is just so well done. So exactly. Well. And it's hard to believe that this movie was a bomb at the box office.
It was. Well, I mean, it was just, it was nominated for Best Picture. It lost out to Forrest Gump. So it definitely, the critics and the Academy took notice, but it just didn't, for whatever reason, it didn't resonate with a mass audience. And it wasn't until it wound up on cable in like the later half of the decade, in 97, 98, 99. I remember being in college in 1999, and it was always on television all the time. And that's where it sort sort of really began to take notice with more of a general audience. You type in one of the great, like, a list of what are considered arguably to be the greatest movies of all time, and Shawshank is usually number one, neck and neck with The Godfather. And it'll be one week, it'll be two, the next week, and it's because of everything that it symbolizes. It's because of that greater that bigger picture narrative of what life is all about, and achieving.
It also goes to tell you that you don't necessarily have to win Best Picture to be the best movie. And I'm not like minimizing Forrest Gump for winning Best Picture that year. I'm just saying,
no, it's a fantastic film. Yeah. I could have put Forrest Gump on here, right? I should have, actually. It's fucking amazing. But that movie, The Shawshank Redemption, was brilliantly acted, brilliantly directed, and the performances are just all around, like everything, like the quintessential villain, right? That you love to hate. And just that idea that this man waited patiently, calm, cool, and collected, and was able to patiently seek his redemption, and it's just such a beautiful story about friendship, about love and loss, about life and how important life is. There's so many, you bet. What's that line? You better
get. How can you be so obtuse?
How can you be so obtuse? Right? That one, of course. How can you be so obtuse? Yeah, I love that. What did you just say to me? But it's hope is a big thing in there, right? Get busy living or get busy dying. I mean, it's just such a, and you can take that. None of us are in prison right now, right? None of us hopefully are not planning on going, to prison anytime soon. But you can take that better, the whole film is a metaphor for everybody's life. And what we want to achieve. And it's just, there's more to it than that, but that's one angle. That's how we can all live vicariously through that movie. Sure. Is we look at that movie as a metaphor for our own lives. And wow, if this man, it's a fictional thing, of course, but if this man can do that, and wow, and it's just great. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. Now, on to the next one, 1999's The Green Mile. Well, this is also a Stephen King adaptation. It is also a prison movie, and it is also directed by Frank Darabont, the same man who directed The Shawshank Redemption. The Green Mile, although different from The Shawshank Redemption, is it evokes the same kind of emotional gravitas and the same kind of pull. It is in many ways a redemption story, not the same kind of redemption story, but in many ways it's that same kind of redemption story. Not the same kind of story, but it's the same kind. It's a redemption story is what I'm trying to say. Right. And the performances are fantastic. I mean, the late great Michael Clark Duncan, of course, who passed away just a few years ago.
Boss.
That's right. This is beautiful. I mean, just one of my favorite movies of all time. I remember when I watched it in the theater, I went to see it in the theater in 1999, and I was so moved. I mean, there were a couple of moments in that movie where I was choking up. The performances were that good. And the soundtrack, funny enough, the soundtrack to this movie is one of my favorites of all time. It's just awesome. Anyways, again, I could keep going deep and deep and deep, but for the sake of time, I want to move on, but definitely two movies that are under Frank Darabont's belt that are both very moving in emotional ways that touch the human spirit. And I just every time they're on television, I have to watch at least 10 or 15 minutes of it. And I'm always so like, God, these are such great stories, and it comes from the same guy that wrote It and Monkey Shines and Cujo. So like, how the fuck, right? Fuck. Right. But like they say, a great storyteller is a great storyteller and should be able to cross genres. Now, for those of you that don't know, Frank Darabont went on after this to direct Jim Carrey in The Majestic in 2001, which wasn't quite as well received, of course, as his previous two outings. And then, of course, he directed another Stephen King adaptation in 2007 called The Mist, which I actually didn't mind. I don't think it's nearly as good as The Green Mile or Shawshank, nowhere near. But The Mist was actually, the ending to The Mist was just like, oh my God. And Frank Darabont had also written a draft for the fourth Indiana Jones movie. And Harrison Ford liked it. Spielberg liked it, but George Lucas didn't, and that's why we got Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Anyway, on we go. So, of course, 1975's Jaws. For those of you that want to know my in-depth thoughts on it, you can watch a Saturday movie night that's on my channel where I watched Jaws. That was just last Saturday. So you can check that out. But definitely Jaws is one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah, I just,
what can you say? I mean,
what can I say? I mean, what can I say about this movie that I haven't already said on this channel? It's, really at the end of the day, here's to swimming with bow-legged women. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So,
to your fair Spanish lady.
That's right. Show me the way to go home.
Boom,
I'm tired and I want to go to bed.
Boom, boom.
I had a little drink about an hour ago and it got back to... Anyway,
yeah.
What's there to say about Jaws that I haven't said already? Again, you can go watch my Saturday movie night. I watch it live, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, next is the original, the very first Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yes, not to be confused with the re-release of this movie on Blu-ray and DVD over the recent years entitled Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Get that shit out of there. I don't know why the hell they can't just keep it as Raiders of the Lost. Well, yeah, but Dave, you see, we want to make it feel like it's part of the trilogy. Who cares? It's called Raiders of the Lost Ark. I hate the fact that when you buy the trilogy now, or if you were to buy this movie on its own now, it would be titled Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just like, who the fuck approved that? George, did you approve that? Anyway,
it's the George Lucas title version.
that's probably it. Now, so I want to say this.
God.
Look, Raiders of the Lost Ark is not my favorite Indiana Jones movie. My favorite Indiana Jones movie, which I guess it should have been on here, but it's not. My favorite Indiana Jones movie is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But the best Indiana Jones film, and I acknowledge that, which is why I put it on here, is Raiders of the Lost Ark. It is the epitome of what Indiana Jones was supposed to be about. It is the poster child for George Lucas and Steven Spielberg's vision on what they were trying to create. Was that swashbuckling 1930s B-movie serials of that time. Raiders fits that perfectly. And although Temple of Doom is my favorite, I love that fucking movie so much. Raiders definitely is the best, and that's why I put it on here, in my opinion, for sure. So anyway, next, needing no introduction. I certainly don't think I need to go on with this one. 1978's classic Halloween by John Carpenter. And that's where I will leave it. You all know what I love about that movie. Okay, my voice is starting to crack a little bit. Okay, moving on is Rear Window, the Alfred Hitchcock classic starring the great Jimmy Stewart. Yes, that's right. Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly. This is, oh my God. Guys, if anybody in the chat room has not seen Rear Window and you want to see why Alfred Hitchcock was so revered, everybody tends to go watch Psycho. Go watch Psycho. It's like, yeah, that's the default. That's the stereotype. But go watch Vertigo. Go watch Dial M for Murder. Go watch Rear Window. You know what I mean? Go watch, there's so many, but Rear Window is probably my favorite Alfred Hitchcock film. And it's pretty much all shot in one location. And the set is great. There's this charm about it because it's clearly not a real apartment building complex. It's clearly a set on the back of Universal or something to that effect. But it's so good. If you don't know what it's about, go check it out. A modern telling of Rear Window really loosely would have been Shia LaBeouf's Disturbia. But that's very modern. Look, in my opinion, although I enjoyed Disturbia, I did. It doesn't hold a candle to Rear Window, but that it's that kind of a movie, right? Okay. He thinks he sees somebody, he's Jimmy Stewart's character obviously is held up in his apartment because he's broken his leg. He's a journalist. I think he's a journalist or a photographer. He's a photographer, photographer. Yeah. And he's spying on his neighbors. He's got nothing else better to do. So he's looking through binoculars and he's seeing all his neighbors. And long story short, he thinks he witnesses a murder. and we'll just, let it play there. But it's done in that classic Hitchcock way: mood, suspense, theater of the mind. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Okay, next is, I believe this is 97. This is a movie that I never see appear on anybody's list, but this has got to be, when I think about this movie, I got to admit, I think it's legitimately one of my favorite movies.
Well, this also came out in that run with Broken Arrow, The Rock, what was the other? Con Air. Like, this movie came out like all within that time frame of those action films.
That's right. That's right. Yes, exactly. This movie, Kurt Russell is one of my favorite actors. I find him so believable in a lot of things that he's in. And, say what you want about Tom Cruise, but you got to admit that Tom Cruise is he's very committed. Okay. His personal life aside, I believe Tom Cruise in every role he's in.
I believe he's hanging from a plane. Yeah, exactly.
Well, no. But I believe that he's that guy. I believe that he is this person. Kurt Russell's another one of those characters. Another one of those actors where, no, I totally believe that he's this guy. Like, he's not Kurt Russell. He is this guy. So this movie Breakdown, when I first saw it, I love the mystery aspect of it. I love the premise where his wife goes missing, and the trucker that she got into the truck, we never see her go missing. We don't know what's happened. So you're put in the same position as Kurt Russell's character. He doesn't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. So you're living vicariously through his character. I love that shit. Anytime a movie does that and does it well, I really like that. So it's like you're him, right? You're him in the car. And his wife gets in this truck. You think it's kind of harmless. There's a little, spot down the street. He seems he's a trucker, right? Seems kind of, nice, trustworthy, no big deal. She never comes back. He never hears from her. He goes to the diner to find out what happened to her, because in case you haven't guessed, if you haven't seen the movie, their little car breaks down. Once Kurt Russell's character figures out, oh, it was just this. Oh, damn it. Click. And the car begins again. He goes to the diner where his wife was supposed to be taken to call for help. When he gets there, nobody has seen her. Nobody's seen her, and nobody's seen the truck. Can you fucking imagine? Like, Tony, I'm thinking about having that happen in real life. I'm with my girlfriend, who I've been with now for years. And, well, first of all, I would never let her get into, you have to suspend disbelief a little bit. Sure. If I was in the middle of nowhere in like Nevada or Arizona, I wouldn't let her get in the truck by herself. Okay. Right. I don't care how trustworthy they seem, but I'm spitting there. Let's just, for the sake of argument, she gets in the car. Can you imagine showing up and no one has seen her? Oh my God, your heart at that moment is like, what the fuck? So because we don't see this character disappear, we don't see the trucker apprehend her. No, everything. The last time we saw her, they were like, okay, see you later. Like, everything's normal. You're instantly put in Kurt Russell's character's place. And it's this mystery. It's this whodunit to figure. There's these shady characters. What's going on? I love it. It's and Kurt Russell's performance is fan-fucking-tastic. I love that movie. And I love the way it ends, and the car chase and hanging from the bridge. If you guys have not seen Breakdown, it's one of Kurt Russell's best performances, bar none. I know you tend to lean on The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China, and
I'm a big fan of Overboard. Kurt Russell, Goldie Hawn. It's a great movie.
Overboard, you mean?
Yes, Overboard.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah. So I'm like you. I don't typically go to, I love The Thing, of course. Everybody loves The Thing. And, I love Big Trouble in Little China, another great film. But my personal favorite Russell film is Overboard with him and Goldie Hawn. It's great.
Overboard is so great. I love that. That was the first movie I ever saw with him in it. And I love that movie. Yeah. But guys, if you haven't seen Breakdown, you've got to see it. It's in my opinion, an underrated thriller. Absolutely.
Well, now I'm going to be very interested, because I know some people mentioned it in the chat room when they saw your list up there, why this next film is on your list, because it just doesn't strike me as a Dave McRae film. So I'm going to be very curious to see how this film affected you.
The Others, really? The Others doesn't seem like a Dave McRae film. Oh, okay. Well, interesting. Well, The Others, of course,
not that it doesn't, but it caught me off guard when you showed it to me. I was like, oh, okay, The Others. All right.
Yeah. So The Others came hot off the heels of let me go back here. The Others, so people can actually see me. The Others came hot off the heels of 1999's The Sixth Sense.
Right.
And for those of you who haven't seen The Others, I'll do my best to try not and spoil the ending, but you know, they're similar, let's say, although I guess that kind of spoils it. But anyway, it's been out for almost 20 years, for God's sakes. If you haven't seen it,
I haven't seen it by now. I mean, come on.
Yeah, seriously. Okay. Spoiler alert. Okay. I have always been a very big proponent when it comes to the supernatural, paranormal subgenre of horror.
Sure.
I'm a much bigger fan of things that are done more grounded and realistically in terms of their subtlety. And, you know, again, that slow burn and that theater of the mind, right? So when I first saw The Others in the theater back in 2001, the mood was fantastic. The setting was great. The atmosphere was brilliant. And the way they played up the supernatural angle to it felt very real. And it was creepier to me because I can identify with that. Now, I had just, not to get into great detail here, that'll be for another show perhaps, but I had an experience in college dealing with a haunted house and crazy things and all that kind of stuff.
Ooh, now you're talking my stuff.
Right. But back then, you know, it was very, you know, things that go bump in the night.
Sure.
And I'm of the mindset that more often than not, there are reasonable explanations for unusual occurrences. But that's not to say that there are not unusual things and phenomena that happens in this world or that we see or we hear that may be unexplainable. It doesn't necessarily mean that they could never be explained, but on the onset, they look sort of, you know, they could be supernatural in its, you know, whatever that is. So, hot off the heels of my experience in college, because this, of course, is after college, this is the summer of 2001. I very loved that. I fell in love with that aspect of The Others, that it was very grounded. It wasn't, you know, the floorboards weren't moving, walls were bleeding, ghosts were coming out. It wasn't. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that kind of stuff. Sure. But The Others, it was like, I'm watching the movie like this. It was like an old Agatha Christie kind of thing, or it was like one of those old black and white. I mean, if you put The Others in black and white and say it was from the 50s, it was like that kind of a movie. Like it was all shadows and, you know, you'd hear something. And I love the piece of the narrative where, according to Nicole Kidman's character, the children have that, I forget what it's called now, but that disease where they're allergic to the light, right? They can't, you know, they can't. So that gives the excuse in the narrative to keep everything dark, to have, you know, the windows closed and the curtains closed and, you know, lanterns. So the entire movie, you know, has this very claustrophobic, eerie kind of vibe. And of course, you know, she goes outside and she meets her husband who's gone away to the war, but he comes back and he's not saying it. It was just brilliantly done. It was all theater of the mind. It was all mood and atmosphere. You were waiting for the ta-da moment. You were waiting for that. And it was waiting and waiting and waiting. But it wasn't like, okay, come on. Everything else was so brilliantly done. And the movie was so well paced that you bought into it, that you were like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, what's going on? And then, of course, the ending, and you find out it's like, oh, shit.
Right.
Oh, that's brilliant. Nobody saw that coming. The only people that got their knickers in a twist, if I could use an old British saying, were people that
said knickers. What the hell?
I did. I'm half British. If I never say that outside of this, though, I don't know why I said that. I was trying to look for something that was kind of funny. Panties in a bunch. There. How's that? But I remember back then, because the ending of The Sixth Sense and the ending of The Others are similar in their, oh, it's this and not this, right? You're led to believe it's this when really it is it. Well, I guess it's kind of, that is the point of a twist, but they're very similar. That The Others was getting a lot of backlash for that. Oh, it's just a Sixth Sense. Oh, it's like, nah, No, no, no. If this movie had, it's only because of the proximity. The Sixth Sense was a box office phenom, being the highest grossing horror movie of all time at that time, or suspense or like whatever it was, made 220 something million dollars at the box office. I think just domestically, I think made more worldwide. It was a big bona fide classic. Nobody saw the ending coming. Oh my God. So you release a movie that has that similar kind of twist in terms of, oh, you're actually, people were like, oh, and they lose the whole idea of how brilliant that movie is. So when I think of ghosts and spirits and paranormal, that's what I really like about The Conjuring. That's what I really like about the first 80%.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, that this is my wheelhouse. I do paranormal stuff. I go out and do ghost hunts and things like that. I haven't succeeded on finding it. Certainly I've always been the one of the mind that I will walk into anything that if someone tells me it's haunted, I'm going to go in there head first. I'll ask my questions later because I've like yourself. And this is why I was waiting to hear what your response was about the others, because not to say that you wouldn't like paranormal stuff, but you always have those conversations with people when you start talking like, oh yeah, I'm into paranormal, things like this and, ghost hunting. You always get kind of that weird look from people like, oh, you are like, oh, you're one of those. So to hear that you're into it like I am, it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll be going up to Toronto with all my ghost hunting stuff and me and Dave are going ghost busting.
That's
right.
But
no, I mean, we could do a whole show on paranormal movies because I agree with you. Everything you just said about the others is 100% spot on. Paranormal Activity was very much like that. It was the simplicity and the storytelling of Paranormal Activity, the slow burn, of just making it seem like, yeah, man, these two couple they're getting haunted by something, and I like that stuff, like you were just about to start off with The Conjuring. It was the simplicity of the storytelling. I've always found that when movies tend to over exaggerate a haunt, like I know a lot of people like Insidious, and I know Insidious is not necessarily a haunt, but to me, like things like that, I just feel it's like over dramatized and it's a lot of special effects. And when you start getting into that part of it with paranormal things, and I start like I don't buy into it. That's where I have my problems with Conjuring 2. When they started getting into like, they brought in the Crooked Man, they brought in the Nun. I'm like, okay, guys, you're getting off the tracks here. Let's focus on the ghost at the end and Phil Poltergeist, But
yeah, no, that's hey, there's another one, Poltergeist, that could easily
be
on my list. Yeah, but The Conjuring, what was so great about The Conjuring is, I mean, look, it's a modern movie. It is more sensational than the others. But what they did with The Conjuring was it was all the power of suggestion leading up to the very last moment. Yes, we saw hands come out and do that, but for the vast majority of the movie, you weren't seeing much. Okay, and as somebody that
it was like that scene you were describing. What was the scene there that we both were on the same page about that was so impactful in The Conjuring? The two girls in the bedroom.
That's right.
Where you didn't see anything. You were so spot on. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, absolutely.
No, the girl, that's right. There are two girls in the bedroom, and the one girl is looking at the corner of her room, and there's nothing there. There's literally nothing there. The camera shows there's nothing there but a dark corner. And her sister is like, what is it? What's wrong? What is it? And I don't know if there's any music or maybe there's
there's nothing. It's just atmosphere. That's it.
There's nothing. And she's looking and she's petrified and she's terrified. That stuff is great.
And she's selling it. That girl is totally selling it.
It's brilliant. That stuff will always be far scarier than what we could ever show you, because you're tapping into the psyche and psychologically from the viewer's perspective. And I mentioned this on a video on my channel that you have to understand that, as an audience member, when you use the power of suggestion in theater of the mind, I might go to a different dark place than Tony does because we have different experiences in our lives. Right. But we're both going to go to a dark place, our own version of scary, whatever that is. If you show us, if you actually reveal it, then I might be like, oh my God, that's exactly what I was picturing. But Tony might be like, nah, lame. And now you're starting to lose people. That's what's so great about the others and movies that play that slow burn. You have your audience for the whole movie. Now you just have to hope that you can deliver on the ending of the movie when you do reveal. And you're always going to lose somebody. You're not going to please everybody. It's about probability. But that's why the power of suggestion is far more powerful and far more scarier, because you're starting to go there in your own mind rather than, and it doesn't mean that other movies don't have their place. I just mean that's why it's so great. So yeah, that's why I love the others, because for me, when I was ghost hunting, if you will, back in the day before ghost hunting was a thing, that's what it was
Never
like.
stop, dude. Never stop ghost hunting. I've always found that
Well, the thing about ghost hunting is that, you know, and I don't want to get off track here, okay?
Sure.
But I just want to quickly say that ghost hunting can be fun, and I support people who go out and try to gather evidence or whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, the sensationalized reality television,
yeah, not like Ghost
shows,
Hunters and Ghost Adventures. I'm not talking that
but
kind of crap.
The problem is, because of those things, they have soured and the credibility factor of that kind of thing has been lost, because it's about nothing more than entertainment. The idea is, when you go out and you capture something, or you get something on tape, or you get a photograph, well, so what? So what? That doesn't tell me anything about, I want to know what it is.
Right.
I want to know how this is possible. Where does the seed of consciousness lie? You know, what is this all about? And for me, it's like, we can go out, you know, and be in this perpetual state of gathering EVPs and ghosts and taking photos, but we're no further along than we were when we started, because we're just in this cycle of, it doesn't tell us what it is. It just tells us that there's something going on. Well, we already know that. So, and I think that doesn't mean we don't gather evidence, but I just think that if you're serious about actually knowing if consciousness survives the process of death, if you're actually serious about that, then you got to start at the beginning, which of course is what happens when we die. You got to study the brain cells and the brain and consciousness and all that kind of stuff. So
I think for me, it's always been just simply about the thrill of the hunt. You know, I think people who are actual hunters, you know, who, you know, go out and shoot and whatnot, you know, there's a lot of similarities to that, because, you know, a lot of times most times, I shouldn't say a lot, most times you're going to go to a place that is deemed haunted. You're not going to see anything. I've never experienced anything supernatural. I have been in situations before that I've questioned, you know, like, okay, well, what was this all about? And, you know, you kind of tap into it, and eventually you come to an answer. Even like, I saw like the comments from last week's video when my hat tipped over. Yeah, that was a little bit creepy when I saw that, because that was not a normal way for a hat to fall. So that was a little bit kind of like, all right, but like, then, you know, you kind of do, you know, you do your deduction, like, okay, maybe it was just angled a certain way, it slipped and then it fell over. So, but I think overall, you know, when it comes to ghost hunting, I probably will never in my entire life will ever experience anything supernatural, but there is a side to it that it's exciting. It's thrilling. It's cool to go into an old mental hospital, you know, and just explore it. And, you know, whether or not you get something or you don't get something, I just still think that there's something fun about it. So that was my whole point of telling you, man, don't ever stop. You know, I've just been a firm believer. Who cares what people think? Go out and do your thing and have fun.
I will never stop. Well, for those of you that don't know, and I can't say anything, Tony knows this, but I can't say anything right now because it's still a process, that I have been in a, speaking of perpetual state, I've been in a state for a few years now, more than a few years, of writing a feature-length screenplay, a major motion picture based on my experience in college. And it's a mystery thriller drama. And it could be quite intense. And I talked a bit about it with Tony, and Tony seemed very intrigued by it. So let's just say maybe one day, once it's all done and copyright protected, I might share it to the masses. But I'm with you on that, Tony. I do understand. You know, you never stop sort of with that thing. I just want people to understand that there's more to it than that.
Absolutely.
You know, you gotta move the ball forward. Anyway, my last one here is 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatcher, starring Donald Sutherland and even what's his face there? Leonard Nimoy makes an appearance in this movie. This movie is not one that you see too often wind up on people's lists. Of course, it is a remake in and of itself from a 50s film, I believe, of the same name. I think it was the 50s. This movie is, I've always loved it because it's the kind of movie that when you are watching it and there's nothing particularly creepy happening on screen, you still feel creeped out watching it.
Yep.
There's something about the cinematography, the pacing, the mood. Donald Sutherland looks a little strange himself anyway, but it's just so good. If you guys haven't seen 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you have to check it out. Again, I could go deep into it, but we're already at 8 o'clock here and I want Tony to get to his. It is a great movie and it's creepy. And I mean, it's dated. Let's not forget it's 1978 here, people. Okay. So the practical effects are a bit dated, but they hold up. They still kind of hold up. And that ending is just, oh shit. Like you can imagine what's like, oh, it's great. It's such an eerie movie. Just the whole idea of it is so eerie. And there's like this apocalyptic impending doom sort of undertone to the whole movie, but it's very subtle and you can feel it. It's like this insidious sort of, thing moving it's so great. I love it. And again, I mean, I want to go into detail of the plot and stuff, but for time's sake, I want to move on. But if you haven't checked out, check it out. Other movies that could have ended up on here. Oh God, The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Shutter Island, The Bridge on the River Kwai. Oh God, there's so many more I could have put on here. Beverly Hills Cop, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Schindler's List, like Jurassic Park, so many, All About Eve. There's so many movies I could have put on here, but I had to be decisive. So those are some of my favorites anyway. So Tony, take it away.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to pick up from where I left off on my honorable mentions. And the last film I was talking about was a documentary called Dogtown and the Z Boys, which is based on the true life story, or it's a documentary film based on the true life of Dogtown, California, which is where the birth of the revolutionary of, and I shouldn't say the birth of skateboarding, but how skateboarding changed and the birth of pool skateboarding and how that came about. And right. Lords of Dogtown is the actual movie that documentary is based around. And Lords of Dogtown, Dogtown stars Heath Ledger. Now I know everybody, immediately goes to The Dark Knight, Heath Ledger's performance as a Joker, which obviously is phenomenal. But I cannot tell you enough, because if you watch the documentary Dogtown and the Z Boys, and then you see the character that Heath Ledger plays in this film, which is Skip Engblom, who was a co-founder to Zephyr Surf Shop, who eventually they created surfboards at the time, but eventually built skateboards with Jeff Ho and those guys out there in California. And Heath Ledger's performance, I'm telling you, it's to me, next to The Dark Knight, it equally rivals it, because he's so spot on. And the reason why is if you watch the documentary and you see Skip's personality, and then you see what Heath Ledger does in the movie, it's absolutely phenomenal. And again, even if you're not a skater and you're not into skateboarding, but just to see how that all came about, and to see how these three kids, Tony Alba, Jay Adams, and Stacy Peralta, changed the game for skateboarders, for kids like me in the 80s who were reading this stuff in magazines. Because you have to remember, back in the day, I didn't have YouTube. I couldn't pull this stuff up online and watch. I had to look at it in my skateboarder magazine and watch what these guys were doing out in California and try to emulate it in Connecticut with my friends,
That's right.
So like when we finally got the movie that came out in early 2000s, it was a great movie. I like the documentary better, but being a skater, I could not have a skateboarding movie on my list of my favorite films. So I highly recommend it. And again, I think just for Heath Ledger's performance alone, definitely check it out. And the movie is called Lords of Dogtown. And then there's a documentary that goes with it, and it's called Dogtown and the Z Boys. Check that out. Next on my list, I actually, because you had this in your honorable mention, you had the Goonies in there, and I had the Goonies on my list. So I took the Goonies off my list while we were talking here. And I'm gonna do The Crow. The Crow, Brandon Lee's The Crow. That was another movie. I actually saw that film 3-4 times in theaters when it came out, 93, 94, somewhere around in there. Unfortunately, I feel like many of us, we were robbed of many great performances to come from Brandon Lee's, because he was launching at this point. His performance in The Crow, I've never been one of those people to compare him to his father, because I don't think he was really much like his father. I think Brandon Lee was more focused in on the acting, whereas Bruce Lee was definitely, the martial artist and, brought into the acting as well too. I don't know. I mean, I know Brandon Lee knew his stuff with martial arts, but he never used martial arts as the foreground of his career, like he was more into acting. Rapid Fire, I know, is one of his first films that he did before The Crow, which is, an all right film. But The Crow, I mean, what can I say about The Crow? I mean, the lines in the movie that me and my friends throw at each other: "Can't rain all the time," "Cemetery is the safest place to be." In my personal opinion, I think it's the best romantic movie of all time. I know girls might debate me on that, but it's just such a great film. Well done. I like the darkness of it, and the practical, aesthetic looks to the filming location that they did for The Crow. And like I said, to start off here, unfortunately for us, we got robbed of what could have been a great acting career for Brandon Lee. I don't know. Do you have anything you want to add to The Crow? Because this was like mine and yours, like right at the beginning of our teenage years.
Yeah, I haven't seen The Crow in years, so I'd have to watch it again to be able to brush up on it. But I certainly remember when it came out, and of course, I remember the tragic incident involving Brandon Lee. So, yeah, I mean, it was a big deal, and weren't they going to do a sequel?
He was going to do a sequel to it. I mean,
Yeah.
they had, and then of course, he had other stuff that he was going to be doing, and then just, like you said, the accident, man, just, robbed us all from that.
Yeah, exactly. No, I haven't seen it in years. I got to watch it, but certainly very worthy of being on that list.
Absolutely. Next, for me is The Return, and not of the King, but of the Jedi. And if anybody knows where that quote is from, 10 points for you. The Return of the Jedi was my first Star Wars film. I like Empire Strikes Back. I'm just not a total big fan of it. I just remember being a kid, man, back in 1983, and my grandfather taking me to go see it. And probably the Ewoks had something to do with it. Like, when you're 4 or 5 years old, you're going to be influenced by the furry little creatures and Wicked and whatnot. But to me, to this day, I think we were talking about this off screen, that scene there between Luke and Vader, the fight scene on the ship, and
Yes.
the music, and they're silhouetted going across. And, I mean, like, I would have just loved to have sat there that day with Lucas and say, okay, dude, how did you come up with this in your mind? Because it's so beautifully shot, because you don't see them. You see the lightsabers, and you got that music, and it's perfectly lit, perfectly silhouetted. In my opinion, it's my favorite of the Star Wars films. Next to Revenge of the Sith, because I do like Revenge of the Sith. I have my issues with the other two prequel films, but I thought Revenge of the Sith did a good job of picking up the mess that the first two started off with. That's all I can really say about Return of the Jedi. What about anything?
Look, I have I like Return of the Jedi. I do. There's I think it's, when you're doing a trilogy, it's not unprecedented that third acts tend to fall short sometimes for people because expectations are so high. You can look at The Godfather, you can look at the Dark Knight trilogy, and the Star Wars trilogy. Yeah, I don't think in my opinion, I don't think Return of the Jedi is as good as Empire or A New Hope, but it's a fine third act. I mean, it's fine.
Sure.
I don't think the Ewoks destroyed anything. I don't think the Ewoks are lame. I think they're fine. You can nitpick and say, well, how did a band of these cute little fuzzy bears attack and destroy all the empires?
It's honestly, it's the underdog story. I mean, look, if you really wanted to break down and study war, and you want to talk about the United States going up against the British during the Revolutionary War, we were not supposed to beat them. We were not supposed to beat the British in the Revolutionary War. It was unheard of. Nobody was beating the British back in the day. And the fact that a bunch of what they say is a bunch of peasants and farmers overtook the colonies and beat the British Empire, it's not unplausible. And I think that's where Lucas got his idea from when creating the Ewoks and that storytelling of the fight between the Ewoks and the Empire.
That's very true, because I believe I read that. Yes, I think that it is a metaphor for that. At least that's one interpretation that you can definitely look at it. I like Return of the Jedi. There's a lot of nice moments in Return of the Jedi that I really liked. And there's a fundamental moment in Return of the Jedi when, oh no, I just should get me started here. Calm down, Dave, calm down. There's a fundamental moment in Return of the Jedi when, as Yoda is dying, he says to Luke, "When I am gone, the last of the Jedi you will be." So, it makes no fucking sense that Rey would now become Rey's going to be a Jedi. Oh, but then when Rey dies, like how many? Oh, don't even get me. I can't even.
Okay, we'll move on.
Let's just move on. Anyways, yes, I like Return of the Jedi. I just feel more I like Return of the. I feel more emotionally attached to Empire because of the reasons that I said. I also. Funny enough, I posted, I don't know if anybody has seen this, on my channel, maybe this time last year. It's been a while, so I didn't have nearly the amount of subs. Maybe I'll post, maybe I could, I don't want to get a copyright strike, but you
gotta be careful. YouTube is going crazy with that stuff now.
They are. For shits and giggles, I took the throne room scene from Return of the Jedi, and the scene where Palpatine is talking to Luke, and saying, strike me down with all of your hatred and your journey toward, that one, right? And what I did is I got the throne room scene music from that scene, and I dubbed my own voice into it. And there's a couple of moments, obviously, where my lips, what I'm saying doesn't match his lips. But it's funny because the line I say is, what do I say? I say, strike me down with all of your naked and your journey towards the dark side, or something to that effect. And Luke turns and you hear like, naked? Did he say naked? It's just a stupid slapsticky funny thing. But it's funny. It's really funny. So it's on my channel. I forget what it's called, but if you scroll back in the videos, you'll see it. Maybe I'll post it again for people. I think it's funny, but then again, it's not really great to laugh at your own shit, but I think it's kind of funny. But anyway, yeah, let's move on. All
right, moving on to my next one on the list. This one goes back to my childhood, and it's actually a film that I watch every New Year's Eve. I've been doing it now for since I was 20, so almost 20 years. Wow. Now that I'm going to be 40 years old next year, it's like it's weird how to say that, like how fast time has really flown. But this is the Godfather. I grew up in an Italian family, diehard Italian family. And this movie, basically, I had to have it like known and memorized by the time I was 5 years old. And there was quizzes on, no, not literally, but, I remember fond moments that today people would go bonkers over, like my uncle, for example. He would come up to me, like if we were having like a family gathering at my grandmother's house on Sunday, and he'd be like, and I have to remember now, I'm like 6, 7 years old, and he'd come up to me like, and bada bang, all over your Ivy League suit. And if you know the line from The Godfather, Sonny is talking to Michael in the meeting that he's going to have with Saluzzo. Or there'd be moments like my father and like my uncle. So there's like 4 boys, and then there's my aunt. Okay. She's the one girl in the family. And like my dad or my uncle, they would say at times, hey, Christine, go take Vinny over to the tree. Okay. Because that's another line in The Godfather where, they're like telling Connie to go take Carl over to the tree and whatnot. So
right.
It was a movie like, and there's a lot of other things that are very true to the Italian culture, like the parades and stuff like that. I mean, that was a big part of my upbringing, going to Nona's house, twice a month on Sundays for the big Italian spread, or the big holiday gatherings with all the families and the cousins and whatnot. So there's a lot that I could personally to relate to, because that really is the Italian culture and very much the Italian way, minus the whole mafia stuff. But what else could I say about The Godfather as far as cinematically? that hasn't already been said. I mean, it is one of the greatest films of all time, and its sequel is equally matched, just like, when you were talking about Empire Strikes Back here not too long ago, where the sequel rivals the original. I mean, The Godfather 2, it's equally as good, if not better, and it's the only two films in cinema history that an original and a sequel won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. Correct me if I'm wrong, if there's another one out there, but I know that they both won Best Picture. I don't know any other films that have done that.
Some people argue that the sequel is better than the original.
Exactly. And I wouldn't disagree with that. If someone said to me, I think Godfather 2, because it's so good, you know what I mean? I could be like, yeah, you're right. Because it does equally rival the original. The only thing that misses for me in Godfather 2 is the absence of Brando. Brando's character, of him playing Don and Vito Corleone, I mean, it's just one of those iconic characters. And, I'm not minimizing Al Pacino's character as Michael Corleone as well, too, because he obviously, he took the reins and he ran with it, in the two films. I mean, you could say what you want about Godfather 3, but in my family, we don't talk about Godfather 3. We just talk about the first two films, and that's it.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah. And it just, Godfather in itself was just such a big part of my childhood. There's a big sentimental thing for it, other than the fact that it's obviously one of the best, films of all time. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to The Godfather that I haven't said.
No, I think you've hit the nail right on the head. I did not grow up in an Italian family, so I certainly don't have the appreciation from that perspective. But I mean, I haven't seen it in a while, so I gotta brush up on that.
Brush up on it.
Yeah,
you're gonna make him an offer he can't refuse. That's what I gotta do.
It kind of sounds like Donald Trump there.
I know, that was like almost Donald Trump, man. It is. Like, wow.
Listen, I like The Godfather. It's the best movie of all time. It's great. It's beautiful. It's amazing. Okay, it's good. Okay, all right, it's good. Okay, it's good. Okay.
Oh, Dave's gone Trump tonight, folks. He's gone Trump. All right, I'll move on to the next film on my list. Now, this one is actually more from a technical side. It was a film that came out not too long ago. And I was talking to Dave about this off camera, and it's the movie called The Big Short, and it deals with the housing crisis that happened here in the United States back in 2008, directed by Adam McKay. Why I put this on the list, I really, really love the way Adam McKay visually told the story of this movie, from the still images that he was using that was during the housing crisis at that time, what inside the story that he was telling with Ryan Gosling's character, how he executed Ryan Gosling to break the fourth wall at certain times in the movie, and then switch it into a narration. It just everything, just the way that film is edited down, I thought was visually absolutely great storytelling, and it impacted me on how I edited my videos. So for those of you who watch a lot of my old videos on YouTube, that's really a big source of where my inspiration came from as a video editor, because I really gravitate to that type of stylization to a film.
Right. Yeah. The Big Short.
Besides the great performances with Brad Pitt and everyone else, it's a great film.
It's a good movie. Yep, it is. Yep, definitely. I agree.
Cool. All right, I'll move on to my next one. The Breakfast Club. I had to throw some love for John Hughes in here.
Forget about.
That's what everybody does. You mention The Breakfast Club, and immediately it's "Don't you shut up!" Oh, sorry.
It's the Breakfast Club. I think for most of us '80s brats, the Brat Pack, it defined. If you were a teenager in the '80s, you definitely could identify with it. Myself, I was a kid in the '80s. If your movie is St. Elmo's Fire, or if it's Pretty in Pink, or 16 Candles, or Breakfast Club, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer when it comes to that particular run with John Hughes in all his films. Judd Nelson, I think his character in that film, in The Breakfast Club anyways, is one of the most iconic characters in cinema. And that moment, when he's walking on the football field and he's pumping his fist, because he's got the girl, it's the underdog story. He ends up with the, pretty girl at the end, even though he's going to be in detention for the rest of his life. He doesn't care because he's got his girl, and just from, his performance to Anthony Michael Hall's performance, Emilio Estevez, Molly Ringwald, it just is an amazing film. And it's a film that, yeah, you could maybe try to get away and tell a similar type of story like that today, but I think it would be very hard to do simply for the fact that technology would kind of ruin it. You know, I think, you know, if you were to try to do a Breakfast Club movie set in 2018, you know, you're going to have kids on cell phones, and just the language isn't going to be the same as it was back in the 80s. So I've always said that, you know, The Breakfast Club is just one of those movies, leave it alone. Don't ever remake it. Don't ever do a modern version of it, because I just don't think it would resonate the same way it did back in 84 or 85 is when it came out.
Yeah, somewhere around there. I agree with what you're saying. I think definitely The Breakfast Club was all about the dynamics of the relationships.
Yep.
And you could remake that kind of a movie today, but the dynamics would be how you execute that. You would have to get your characters in a position where it would seem genuine that they wouldn't be on their phones. Like, you can't just not have phones, you know, for the sake of propelling the narrative forward. You have to put them in a situation. So I guess, you know, I don't know, do kids still get detention?
That's the other thing, right? I mean, what's the punishment today in school versus to like kids going to detention on Saturday?
Right. I mean,
you know?
I remember getting detention, but if you were to do that, it would be the 2018 version of that, whatever that is, whether it's you know, maybe 5 kids get stranded at a ski lodge without any, you know, reception on their phone. I don't know. I mean, something is ski lodge. It's just, you could do it, but it would be a very, very modernized version of it. And I don't think it would necessarily have the charm. Because like you said, what kids care about today, what teenagers care about today, the dynamics are different. The social sort of intent is a bit different. I mean, it's not that it's completely different. I mean, look, boys want to date girls and girls want to date boys. Okay. I mean, that's, you know,
and you could even in today, you know, Judd Nelson's character could be almost looked at as a bully the way he treats Anthony Michael Hall, based on the standards of what it's like in school today for kids. Whereas back then, I don't look at him as a bully, but by today's standards, people might look at him as a bully.
Well, it's the same thing that we had a brief discussion with last week about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and how people look at it as a bully, and how I said it's, well, yes, but it's fundamental to the moral of the story.
Sure.
You know, and yes, he could be bullied in that movie, you know, Michael Hall's character. I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, they could do a Breakfast Club today, but they couldn't remake that movie today. Like, you wouldn't have call it The Breakfast Club and don't you forget, and you got 5 kids in detention and the angry principal comes in, and no, it would be ridiculous, because the social dynamic of high school is not what it was. You know, it's not what it was. It was for us in the 90s, you know, but that's because we were only 10 years removed from that. But now, I mean, it's like we said, I mean, what kids care about. Kids aren't watching TV anymore. Kids aren't even on Facebook hardly anymore.
Right.
You know, and I found that out through my buddy who has a 17 and a 15-year-old. I said, well, they're probably, and my girlfriend says that too. She has a degree in sociology, and so she's very good at understanding the dynamics of relationships and things like that. And she even said to me, she goes, no, kids aren't watching TV right now. You know, they don't care about that. It's technology is expanding so quickly that kids it's like ADD. They're just on to the next thing. Like, I didn't even know what Snapchat was until like a couple of years ago. I was like, what the fuck is that? You know, I'll Snapchat you. I'm like, what do you mean? I thought we were into Facebook.
Are you kidding me? I just learned what TikTok was. I didn't even know what the hell TikTok was.
I don't even know what the fuck TikTok is. What the hell is TikTok? But that's my point. The social dynamics of how kids interact is so different that it would be a very different movie. The intent would be the same, the social intent that you get these 5 kids together, and, you know, but that would be the only thing that would be the same. You know, how they interact and what they care about and what drives that narrative would be very different, very different. So I agree with that.
Cool. All right, moving on. Now, this is going to shock a lot of people. I know. I can already see what the comment section is going to be like upcoming this week. It's going to be the original 1978 Halloween. Now, If we were talking about the franchise Halloween, I would probably put Halloween 4 before the original Halloween. And I've said this many times for the sentimental reasons. But now if we're going to talk a movie, how it impacted my life and the decisions that I've made in my life on what I wanted to do in a career, Halloween was a huge part to, wanting to become a photographer and make films and make movies and whatever. I mean, the only thing I could say about Halloween that isn't said enough is this. John Carpenter is the man, and I take nothing away from John Carpenter, but without 3 other components to that film, Halloween would not be what it is today, and that is Deborah Hill, Tommy Lee Wallace, and Dean Cundey. And I know some people are going to be like, what are you talking about, dude? Well, here, just one example with Tommy Lee Wallace. You have another set designer working with Carpenter on this film. When he goes to,
sorry, I just want to add, I would add in there Erwin Yablans.
Erwin Yablans, yes, for creating the idea of the babysitter story.
Yeah.
It was that team is what
and Halloween.
And Halloween, exactly. And, it was that team of people that, we all praise Carpenter, but Deborah Hill doesn't get enough credit. Wallace doesn't get enough credit, and neither does Dean Cundey. And my point that I was going to start to make here with Tommy Lee Wallace as the set designer, you have someone else there with Carpenter working with him on this film. Whoever that person is goes out to get a mask. He may not come back with the Captain Kirk mask. It's Tommy Lee Wallace who comes back with the Captain Kirk mask, and he makes the adjustments that he makes to it. So, I mean, when you think about that, it's Tommy Lee Wallace it's the reason Michael is the iconic look today that we all love and know. It's
Absolutely.
Not John Carpenter. It's Tommy Lee Wallace's. And then when you talk about just beautiful cinematography, that opening sequence to this day, I talk about it and with a lot of people when it comes to film. It's one of my favorite moments in cinema because it's, Dean Cundey and just how he beautifully danced with that Steadicam from when he slides out there and you see the reveal of the house and he's walking up to it, and it's all done in one long take. But it just is so beautifully done. And I mean, I can sit here for hours and talk about it. But the reason why it's on my list of favorite films of all time is because, when I think back to when I was in high school and the reason why I took, video class and photography classes, it was because of Halloween. That not Halloween 4, but the original 1978 film. When I finally saw that, it had that type of an impact on me. And when I watched that movie, I'm like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I loved everything about it. Even the little moments of that movie, when Tommy is looking out the window and you see Michael, which is actually Deborah Hill, for those who don't know, standing there silhouetted, as the shape.
I love that shot.
Yeah, it's one of my most favorite shots in the film. Yeah. I'm like, damn, man, this is why I want to be a photographer. I like how you thought of that, whoever it was, whether it was Carpenter or Cundey, or if it was Tommy Lee Wallace's set design, however they came up with that. And even, the reveal of Michael at the end, when, Jamie Lee Curtis is standing there in the doorway and you see the slow, and I love listening to Tommy Lee Wallace talk about that, how he came up with the idea with the fading of the light to reveal Michael's mask in the background. You don't see that type of, practical, realistic look to film anymore. I know they tried their best to get that with the new 2018 film. And I feel that some parts of it, they got really close with it, but nothing like what that core group was able to capture and put together back in 1978. So that's, it's why it's on my list. I mean, is there anything you want to add to what I just said? I mean,
well, I have a long list of videos on my channel that people can watch on Halloween. I mean, I agree with everything you've said, and John Carpenter should get the credit that he deserves. Absolutely.
I'm not saying that he doesn't, but it's not just him.
That's right. And people often forget about Erwin Yablans as well, a man who wanted to do a low budget horror movie, who came up with the idea that it would have to do with babysitters, who came up with the idea to call it Halloween, and who also came up with the idea for that iconic, which is arguably one of the most iconic posters in motion picture history, the original Halloween poster. That was Erwin Yablans' idea about making a fist with a knife and things like that. So, and it was Erwin Yablans' idea to hire Donald Pleasance as well. So
do you know? I just learned something about that.
So you're right. There's a lot of Carpenter gets a recognition that he gets, and so he should, because he directed it, he wrote it, and he scored it, and his name's above the title. And absolutely, but you're absolutely right that those other important pieces, Irwin to Deborah to Tommy, and to Dean Cundy, absolutely played an integral role. It's an when you make a movie, it's an ensemble experience, and you are only as good as the team around you, and you must not understate or underestimate the impact of those people. So I agree.
This is how good that movie poster is from '78. Do you know? I never until it was like a year or two ago. I did not know that in Michael's hands there's a face. I never knew that.
Yeah, I don't know if that
if
is.
It's not. It's certainly, from an artistic, it looks like a face, even if it's not.
It could be perceived as a face, absolutely. I am not sold yet that was that was the artist's intent.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on that, because you can certainly look at it and also not see a face. So, which could be the idea. It's very abstract that way. But certainly that is something that people often interpret. And people also have interpreted the Coca-Cola logo on its side. It looks like a hat with a cigar. And you can see anything and anything if you really wanted to. So I'm not sold that was intentional, but certainly that is a neat little kind of, tidbit. Sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me move on to, I'll kind of put these together because it's done by the same director, John Avildsen, and both movies are kind of similar in a way. And I know we're trying to wind up here in the next 20 minutes. So Rocky and the Karate Kid, directed by John Avildsen. Talk about I don't know if he intentionally did this to do two films that are similar, but I mean, the Karate Kid, I mean, obviously for those of you who follow me on my channel, I've done the Cobra Kai reviews. You know how much this movie means to me. I mean, this movie was this movie was my childhood. I mean, it defined my childhood. It was my life. When Ralph Macchio talks about those stories of, kids out in the parking lot when he was walking out of the theater in New York and he's seeing little kids doing the crane. That was me in Connecticut doing the exact same shit. When my grandfather took me to see this movie in theaters, I was doing the crane technique and whatnot. And it just, there's nothing more that I can already say about this film that hasn't been said. If you grew up in the 80s, definitely as a kid, I'm sure you're like me. This was definitely in one of your favorite movies that you grew up watching as a kid.
Sure.
And it's the underdog teenage story, which segues into Rocky. Rocky, talk about a film here with Rocky and a movie that the studio didn't even want to back financially. They didn't want Stallone to be the lead actor in this film to play Rocky Balboa. They gave them barely $1 million to make this movie. And turns out the movie makes over $200 million in its original release. I think it won Best Picture that year, if I'm not mistaken.
It did, yes.
It did? Right. So it wins Best Picture, and today it grosses close to $1 billion, for a movie that the studio really thought was going to flop at the time.
Well, I think what's so great about, and I agree with you. I mean, Rocky could have easily been on, my list. So it's the great thing about the original Rocky. Rocky, okay, again, Rocky 4 is my favorite Rocky movie, but that's because it's that, it's that redemption, it's that us versus them, it's that, it's got that nice little kind of thing about it. If you can change, we can change. What does he say? Oh, he says,
if I can change, you can change. We all can change.
He's like, if I can change and you can change, everybody can change. I just love it. I love it. But
so 80s.
But it's so great, and of course at the height of the Cold War but when you look at it objectively and you look at the original Rocky movie, I mean, there's no question that the original Rocky movie is the best in the series.
Absolutely.
For a variety of reasons. When you want to look at it from, you remove your affection for the superhero cartoony Rocky 4 to the real sort of grounded, realistic original Rocky from '76. What is so good about that movie is you can't help, when you know Stallone's story from rags to riches, because he really is a rags to riches kind of guy. I mean, let's not forget that he sold his dog
Right.
so he could eat. And then when he made Rocky and made some money, he bought his dog back.
Right.
And he sat at his kitchen table or wherever he was in some slum shithole apartment, whatever it was, writing it, long form on a piece of, on a, legal pad and a pencil, whatever he was doing. And obviously it was eventually shaped up and whatever, but that's what he did. I mean, that in and of itself is so inspiring for anybody who is in the entertainment industry, wants to get into the entertainment industry, whether you want to be a voice actor or a writer or a director or an actor or a screenwriter, whatever it is, or whatever your dream is, even if it has nothing to do with the entertainment industry, just that perseverance alone.
Right.
He wrote that about himself. Rocky is a metaphor for Sylvester Stallone's journey. Now, that doesn't mean that he wasn't inspired by the boxers and the stories of those boxers at the time. He absolutely was, but it was him. He was writing about himself as well in a unique sort of way. And so when you watch Rocky and you realize and you understand Sylvester Stallone's story, you're like, damn, man, like that's really inspiring that he was there. And of course, the rest is history. And he becomes one of the most iconic movie stars of all time. And you can say the same thing about Arnold as well, right? You look at Arnold's, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, yes, they're predominantly action star based and, but you cannot argue the impact that they have made. So, really amazing.
I think that's why, when it comes to Rocky and, Karate Kid, I mean, you can use both of them and the similarities and in how even Rocky's character ends in the original film. And same thing with Daniel's character ends at the original film. Their characters are not ending as Daniel won the tournament. It's not like all of a sudden they become, rich and famous and that, Daniel goes back to being the everyday student that, Miyagi student and whatnot. And I think, and I kind of skipped over this when I was talking about Karate Kid, in that, the Karate Kid and the lessons that it can teach you in life still hold up to this day. Yes, everything that Miyagi and the principles that Miyagi's teaching Daniel throughout the entire film, absolutely it's a principle for life that, can resonate with, today's movie going audience. And I think it's going to be one of those films that's going to carry for generations to come. And the same thing with the Rocky story, like you were just talking about, that whole underdog, who can't gravitate to that type of, this is, we all are underdogs. At some point in life, everybody can relate to that type of story, no matter what it is you're going into for whatever career. You're going in as the underdog and you're looking for your shot, or even with Daniel's character in the Karate Kid, you are the underdog and you're gonna get your shot. And when you get that moment, how are you going to seize that moment?
Exactly. Look, you've hit the nail on the head. Look, some movies are better than others. Some executions are better than others, but that redemption story is, you can take something as serious and as, beautiful as the Shawshank Redemption. Redemption's right in the title of the goddamn movie. Or you can look at something like Rocky. It's the same thing. I mean, very different narratives and very different, things at stake. Okay. But that's why we all can live vicariously through that, because we're all thinking about how that relates to us in our own lives. And they can be very inspirational that way. The Rocky stories are formulaic, once you get into the later sequels, they become, okay, you got your lose, your training montage, your win, your lose, your training montage, they become, but they're fun to watch. Why are they always fun to watch? Because at some point we're always fighting against something, whether it's our past, whether it's a relationship, whether it's our boss at work, whether it's our friend, whatever it is, there's always something that we're, striving to make better or striving to achieve or whatever. And that's why, whether it's something as, intense, as profound and as critically well received as the Shawshank Redemption, or something like, Rocky IV, we love watching somebody who's an underdog rise above it because we live vicariously through it. And it's great.
And then, of course, I mean, with the Karate Kid, and I'll go to my final movie here, there's not too many movies that have an iconic moment like the crane kick that ends up becoming in the lexicon of pop culture. And for us, you and I mean, this was our childhood.
That's right.
That move, that move, I mean, totally defined every 80s kid, childhood. You know?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. There's a lot of things like that made it into the pop culture consciousness, and that was definitely one of them.
Awesome. Yep. All right. So now my final and last film won't shock anybody.
Debbie Does Dallas. Oh my God. That's wonderful. Wonderful.
Woo! All right. We're going a major shift here.
Deep Throat. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Okay.
No, a Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
Yeah, A Clockwork Orange by far is probably my all-time favorite movie. Like, if I were to pinpoint a movie that is my favorite, it is that. It is a movie that I watch once a month. I will watch it with the sound on. I will watch it with the sound on. I will literally watch it just to watch what was Stanley Kubrick thinking when he was framing this shot up or framing this next shot up. And I've applied everything that is in that movie to my career as a photographer. When I think of a photo shoot and I'm working on a photo shoot, I try to put my mindset into the mind of what Kubrick would do, how he would frame up this situation that he's in to create the absolute best picture. And if I have to take the picture 80 times to get the right shot with my client, that's what I'm going to do. So I inherited a lot of his traits as a director and how he approached filmmaking to my own personal life and how I work with clients and whatnot. And I've said this a couple of weeks ago when we were when someone asked me on Instagram, hey, you know, what school should I take to become a photographer? I did the school of Stanley Kubrick. Watch his films, watch him on silent, train your eye to see in the rule of thirds and how he's using leading lines and how he's using negative space. And if you could see all of what he's doing, you're going to be a good photographer and you're going to do very well with
yeah, because people a lot of people don't realize that Stanley Kubrick, before he was a film director, he was a still photographer.
He was a still photographer. He was a great still photographer.
Yeah.
And he applied a lot of those principles into his films, whether it's The Shining or Clockwork Orange or 2001 Space Odyssey. But for me, just like when I watch that, I get so like, I geek out. It's one of those movies where I do have my geek out moments where it's just like, I watch like that scene there where Malcolm McDowell is walking around the record shop. Okay. And you know the scene I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
Okay. So he's walking around there and it's perfectly, Malcolm McDowell, dead center framed. Everything is leading lines, as he's walking through, and then he slowly turns into the center shot where, he's got the girl here, he's got Malcolm right here, and he's got the dude in the background. Like, everybody's perfectly framed that if you were to take a photograph, I'm like, Jesus Christ, how do you go from this shot and all in one take, and then you center it with Malcolm McDowell and the actresses like that? Like, I mean, it's not only that scene, but even the scene where Malcolm McDowell first shows up to prison. If you watch that again, watch how it starts off with the prison guard there, and you see the tubs, and you see the perfectly leading lines of the tubs, and then you watch how the cinematographer turns this way, and now he's perfectly leading line up all the way to Malcolm McDowell, but then he center frames Malcolm McDowell, and again, still all in one take, and he follows Malcolm McDowell briefly to another perfectly leading line shot to Malcolm McDowell, center framed with the prison guards up there, all in one take. He literally executes 4 different shot sequences all in one take, and you don't see that type of filmmaking anymore. And I mean, I could literally be here for hours talking about Stanley Kubrick and his films.
He was a very meticulous. I mean, he was known to shoot 30 or 40, if not more, takes of one scene.
Right.
And he was known to deliberately exhaust his actors because he felt that he would get better because
he
of
did
their
that on The Shining. They talk about that on The Shining. Like, he drove Jack and what was her name? Jack and Shelley Duvall. Yeah, he did that on purpose. He drove them to that point, and that's what we ultimately get in The Shining. And I could have easily mentioned that on my list as well too. I know you did, and The Exorcist. And and when
there's a couple of Kubrick films. Well, I left Kubrick off actually, but easily ask me again next week. And Clockwork Orange, The Shining, 2001. I mean, Barry Lyndon. I mean, anything could have wound up there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I mentioned this, several times. If you want to be a filmmaker and you want to make movies, or if you want to make a good movie, a good horror movie, I've said this many times. You watch movies like A Clockwork Orange or The Exorcist or The Shining and learn, or even Halloween for that matter, and just watch how these movies are executed. Why are we still sitting here talking about these movies 30 plus years later? Why? And there's a reason for that. And if you want to be a good filmmaker, you watch how those films were made. You know, we were talking about this several weeks ago when in that scene in The Exorcist where the priest is running around the track, just the tonality of that movie, you get the sense that it's cold, it's November, and you know, the mood, it's just, you know, like something's just not right. And it comes across, and you don't see that much anymore in filmmaking today.
No, you don't. And it's unfortunate, but the cinematography aspect, the DP and the director should have to work very close together. And the DP's job, of course, is to execute the director's vision. And that doesn't mean that the DP, you know, doesn't bring their own, you know, creative input to it. It's a mutual collaboration. But at the end of the day, it is the DP's job to execute the best he or she can to the director's vision. And when you know how to translate a season or a temperature on screen just visually, you know, like you said, like that scene in The Exorcist, and there's other examples of it too. Like I thought the cinematography in that film Prisoners was just brilliant.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple of shots in there where I'm like, it feels cold here,
right?
You know, and it's
if you can make the audience feel like they are a part of the environment,
right,
you've done your job as a filmmaker.
Right.
And that's what we don't get a lot of. It's, you know, not just with The Exorcist, but, you know, Halloween is the same way. Halloween makes you feel, even though, you know, we know today, we know the movie shot in California, it's in Pasadena. We know that if you're ever there, it doesn't look anything like a Midwest town. No. But because Dean Cundy was so meticulous on his cinematography and framing the shots up right, you even though, I know in the far distance in some of the shots you see the palm trees, but you still feel as if like you are a part of this small Midwest town. And that is like what I think you and I were talking about in our review with the 2018 Halloween, that what the new film was lacking. It didn't make me feel like I was a part of that town, where in the original film, it makes me feel like I'm a part of that town. Like I'm there with Laurie throughout this whole, you know, journey leading up to that, you know, the ending there in the closet.
Right. Well, it's a differently paced movie, right? And one of the things for me that Halloween 2018 was missing was the emotional connection to my surroundings, and that was not there for me. So no, you're right. And when it's done well and it's executed well, it can be pretty special. And Kubrick's movies are a good example of exactly what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this, you know, I mean, there's so many, like when you were talking there, when you were at the end of your list and you started going on with a couple more, I was like, oh my God. Yeah. Like, I mean, there's Tarantino films that we haven't even talked about tonight that I absolutely love. And then there's like other inside joke movies with me and my friends. Like I was telling you about that movie House Party with Kid and Play. Man, me and my friends as kids, we would watch that movie all the freaking time. Bilal, whatever your name is, boys from Cleveland, and they name them an African name. Like, I mean, there's just so many like movies like that growing up as a kid that I watched so many times. Or like, you know, movies like Say Anything with John Cusack, or the one I suggested to you with Johnny Depp there, Benny and June. You know, I think that would be a great movie for you and your girl to watch. I think you guys would really like it. It's not like a total chick flick. It's a movie that like, you know, a dude can watch it because Johnny Depp's performance, I think, is really good in it. And it's just, you know, it's a kind of cool 90s, you know, movie that.
Well, I gotta say, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, one of my favorite comedies of all time too is What About Bob?
What About Bob? That's a freaking great movie. Dreyfuss and Murray, are you kidding me? Fucking great movie.
Why did you kick out Bob? He's not gone. And he opens the door, and you know he's like, "Is this some kind of radical new therapy?" You see, it's just so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that movie. Oh my God, what a
and movies that make you think, like Interstellar, space movies. I love that stuff. I love the science behind that, even though I don't understand a lick of any of it.
Right.
I love watching it. I feel like I'm like 10 times smarter after I watch like, movies like that. I'm like, okay, I didn't know this, but do you want to take a couple quick questions here?
Yeah, we only got about 5 minutes here, guys, as I got a jet. But let's take some questions. So we'll take a couple of questions anyway. Anybody got any questions for us in the chat room? 123 people watching right now. Just deliver a question, and we will answer it as best we can. Loggerhead says, what do you think of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974? Well, I haven't seen it in quite a few years, but I do remember I like it. I like it. I think it's the only Texas Chainsaw Massacre film that I actually like. I did actually like the remake from 2003 or 4 with Jessica Biel. I thought that was all right. I thought that was pretty good. But definitely the original is a classic in its own right. And I stand to be corrected, but I don't think there was any, or if there was, there certainly wasn't a lot of blood in the original Texas Chainsaw.
I actually just rewatched it again this past October. I went through some movies that I hadn't watched in a while, and the Chainsaw Massacre series was one of them. I'm with Dave on this. I love the original film, the original Tobe Hooper Texas Chainsaw. And there's some great, obviously iconic shots, obviously with the girl in the short red shorts walking up to the house as the house kind of engulfs her. That's a great cinematic moment, especially in horror film. And to me, I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre bridges the gap between the when you talk about movies like Psycho and Rosemary's Baby, and then you get to Texas Chainsaw. It's like, I think that was the launching pad for when we finally get to Halloween and the slasher genre. And I think Texas Chainsaw definitely cannot be overlooked when you talk about iconic slasher films. It is definitely one that you do put into the conversation as one of the best that's up there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a classic. I don't particularly like any of the sequels, but it did, back in 73, 74?
74, yeah.
74. Yeah. I mean, it did enter the pop culture consciousness, and it is what it is. Yeah, for sure. Okay, we'll take a couple more here. Tony, you pick one.
Sure. Let's see here. Are you guys going to see the new Child's Play movie, or are you excited? ACDC asked that question. Are you excited to see the new Child's Play movie? Well, I mean, I'm a fan of the first film. I mean, it's not in my top favorite scary movies of all time. I'm not like one of these like diehard Chucky people. Even though the irony of that statement is I've seen all the films brutally. I've sat through a lot of them, especially the recent films that are like so terribly bad, and how this franchise has still got life in it is beyond me. Yeah, I mean, of course, it's a horror film. Of course, I'm going to go see it. I sat through The Nun this year, which, you guys know my thoughts on that. I wasn't a big fan of it. I was very disappointed that it was the first letdown from the Conjuring universe, as far as that whole cinematic thing goes. But as far as Chucky, yeah, I mean, if there's a horror film, it's even like when, the sequel to Halloween 2018 comes out, I'm going to go see it. I'm going to go see the new Friday the 13th whenever freaking Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller can stop acting like 2-year-olds fighting over a toy in a sandbox and give us a new film. I'm going to go see that. I will never not go see a horror film. I don't care if it's bad or good. I saw Happy Death Day. Actually, that was one of those movies that made me eat my words, because I actually enjoyed that film. I thought it was going to be bad, but it actually turned out to be a good movie. So, but yeah, I'm going to go see it. What about you, Dave?
Well, like you, my favorite Child's Play is the very first Child's Play. It is, Chucky is genuinely scary in that movie. It wasn't until the later sequels, of course, that he starts to have this, he becomes almost a character of himself. So I lost interest after part 3. I haven't seen any of the rest. I've seen 1 and 2, and I saw 3 because I think 3 is the one where Andy goes off to military or something to that effect. And I never saw any of the others. So, I know about it being rebooted. Obviously, I know about all the posters that are being launched right now, and the Buddy doll and all that kind of stuff. And but I'm not. I don't know. I'm curious. I'm cautiously curious to see what they're going to do, because it's not going to be about a possessed doll. It's going to be more of the artificial intelligence sort of way.
Right.
So I'm curious to see what's going to happen. My only worry is, and I mentioned this, when did I mention this? I feel like I mentioned this not that long ago. What was my last thing I did? I mentioned this. Maybe it was last week. I think
we were talking about this briefly last week.
Maybe it was then.
Yeah.
My only concern is that this is going to end up, because nobody wants this, and because Mancini, I think that's his name, right, wants to do a television route, which I don't think necessarily is the right way to
Oh
go.
God, I don't think it's the right way to go at all.
No, and there's reasons for that. My concern is that this is going to get the Ghostbuster treatment. And look, I'm not saying that Ghostbusters 2016 was a good movie. I'm just saying that I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. I think there's a lot of other reasons why people just love to hate that movie. And I'm worried that when you look at the new Child's Play movie that comes out objectively, when you look at it objectively, you probably could think, actually, you know what? It's not bad. It was actually all right. But because there's so much backlash behind it, because it doesn't have Mancini attached to it, it may not have the original voice, of course, right, of Chucky. It's going to be this whole new thing that people are just going to hate it before they see it, and that's likely to happen with some people, some diehard fans of what the original Child's Play was all about. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I want to see a trailer for it. I'm not overly excited because Child's Play was not one of the, I never got into the series. I appreciate the first movie because I think the first movie is very good. I wouldn't necessarily say brilliant, but I think it's very good. It was a neat take. It was a neat take, this possessed doll but the whole point is that he's possessed the doll so he can eventually, possess a body. I mean, that's what he wants to do. At least I stand to be corrected, but I think that's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to live his whole life in a doll. He wants to get into Andy because he wants to, become a person again. So you lose that side of it, and it's just this artificially, this doll that's just about artificial intelligence, and that's interesting. But I don't know if that's necessarily going to mesh well with the general audience. So I don't know. I'm interested, but I'm not excited about it because I'm not overall a Child's Play fan, right? And that's just my take. It's just I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm not a Child's Play fan. At the end of the day, I like the first movie, but I couldn't give a frog's fat ass about the rest.
I'm the same way, but it was a good question, and I wanted to give a brief shout out here before we disconnect because I saw someone in the chat room who's from my neck of the woods in the New England area of the Connecticut, Mass area, talked about Riverside Amusement Park. Dave Johnson, I saw that, and yeah, man, Riverside Amusement Park. It was an amusement park local to us. Locals only pretty much went to this park before Six Flags came in and commercialized it and bought it out and ruined it for everybody. But what was funny is he must have saw a picture I shared on Instagram. I shared it on Instagram story. I found an old black and white photograph that I took of the Cyclone roller coaster, and the roller coaster next to it was called the Black Widow, which was a loop roller coaster. Just kind of I'm going through a lot of old pictures because I'm actually going to be starting up doing videos on YouTube again, but it's going to be more centered around Photographer's Journal. And it's kind of like a weekly show that I'm going to do on my channel where I'm going to be going out and just doing photography stuff and like how I search for things, and also bringing out pictures from my past and photos that I've taken from my past. And that was one that I came across last night. I was like, oh my God, Riverside Park. I totally forgot about this thing. And so, yeah, Dave, man, Riverside Park now, always, and forever. So
very cool. Well, guys, that's going to do it for us here on episode 5 of Two Dudes and Some Bullshit. We appreciate everybody tuning in, of course. Tony and I were talking about our favorite movies. For those of you that entered the show a bit late, again, these were not our favorite movies or just our favorite movies of all time. These were some of our favorite movies of all time. The list could be probably 50 or 60 movies long, but we had to be decisive and pick some. There's definitely some that I wanted to get in there that I had to leave off. Like, we talked about, it's so crazy. So
it is. I'm sure, you know what, we're probably going to revisit this topic again in 2 months from now. I'm sure we will,
Yes.
But do you want to let the kiddies know what we got on the horizon before we disconnect?
Yes. Well, next week, Tony and I are going to be talking about, what was it? Something to do with
Christmas, our Christmas movies and Christmas moments, and moments that we have with family. We really want to make this next show coming up very engaging with you guys as well too. Maybe you guys will be, sharing some stories, whether it's holiday movies or holiday times with your families. I thought, that would be, me and Dave thought that would be a really cool idea for us to do. Because we're coming. I don't think we're going to do a stream together a couple of days before Christmas because I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be with my family. But next week, and we thought would be the time to segue into our holiday show.
Exactly. So next week we will be talking about some of our favorite Christmas movies, but we're also going to open up the chat room a little bit earlier this time. So we want to take your questions. We thought it'd be nice to kibitz back and forth with you guys, talking movies and everything, movies, Christmas, or whatever you want to talk about. We'd like to sort of maybe have it Christmas movie centric, but certainly you can ask us anything.
Yeah. Like
desire,
don't you don't have to like, you know, pin it down to just Christmas topic.
No, exactly.
Whatever you guys, we want to make it more for you guys, you know, because I think, you know, we're not going to do anything the week after that. Is that correct? Is that definitive?
That's correct. Yeah. No, I think Tony and I, because the Sunday after that is the 23rd. So that's one day before Christmas Eve. So we'll probably take a break that week and hopefully maybe come back a week later. But I will let you guys know when and if that's going to happen.
Awesome. So yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to follow us on social media, you guys know the drill. The links are in the description. Tony is only on Instagram, but his link is in the description, and all my links are down there as well. So in the meantime and in between time, I will talk to you guys soon. A reminder, of course, this Wednesday, December the 12th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on this channel, I will be doing a video with Marion Singh, the neighbor that looks out her window and gets stabbed through the throat by Michael Myers in Halloween 2018. I'll be interviewing her right here on this channel this coming Wednesday. And now that I'm starting to feel about 90% because of this damn cold, I'm hoping to get some videos up this week as well. So I appreciate everybody's patience. But yeah, so that's all I got to say. Tony, any last words?
Yeah, our buddy Devontae Huntley has been ripping it up in the chat room again tonight, you know.
Has he? Oh, that's
yeah, you know, so like I wanted to make sure I said hello to him because I know how important it is for us to say hi to him and to acknowledge him and to give him his 5 seconds of notoriety. Buddy, just to let you know, this is not how you go about getting people to want to read your script. Like Dave said last weekend, you're better than that. You're bigger than that. To make lewd comments like that in the comment section and to be commenting the way you are with other people in there, bro, rise above that crap, man. You know what I mean? If you want us to do stuff, you got to come at it in a professional way because that's what me and Dave have to do on a day-to-day basis with our clients.
Absolutely. 100%. Everybody is better than that. I absolutely agree. Okay, guys, in the meantime and in between time, Tony and I will talk to you guys soon. Cheers.